Square Ball Podcast.
Hello to you and welcome to the show. It's brought to you with West Yorkshire Electrical, this one, with Phil Hay. Me and Michael here from the Square Ball. If it's got wires in it, they will work with it, won't they?
That's what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
All electrical stuff, including solar panels, batteries, car chargers, CCTV, fire alarms,
Lighting. Finance available for work on your home and business. We're doing this. Are you doing this without a script, by the way? Because I am just trying to remember exactly what's on it.
I just know things that use electricity.
Right.
It's all up here, you see.
Wow. Up here. First yard's in your head, isn't it?
Yeah,
as you were saying this week on the show. So that's good. wyelectrical.co.uk for
and
details.
The roofing.
Yeah, and the roofing. You wouldn't say, electrician, fully accredited electrician at that.
Obviously.
First thing that comes to mind, roofing. It's not, but they do roofing now, don't they? Quite separate to the electrical stuff and quite separate to the solar panels. That's why they've got roofers. Do so many solar panels. So bloody many. Need a team of roofers to do it properly with them, don't they? So wyelectrical.co.uk for details. Into the show. Hello, Phil. You all right?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Busy whole week, this one, hasn't it? Been a busy old week as we head into the Friday night game. I had in my head that it was Friday today. It's just...
It might as well be. Busy old week, busy old month, busy old year.
Yeah. Can we start, not with Leeds, but with Leicester?
Oh, yeah, if you want, yeah.
Because I've read that full judgment this morning. So the EFL have released a statement. So I'm going to run this by you as I understand it, see if this tallies up with what you understand, and tell me where I've got this wrong. Right? So if you've not heard or you've not seen the statement, the EFL released a statement saying some stuff about FFP. Leicester have been naughty. Leicester have saying we're not being naughty. There's been a ruling. Right. So Leicester essentially, when they come down to the Championship, they have to start reporting future financial information, it's what's called, to the EFL about where your finances are heading, because they don't want everybody to get in trouble, because quite frankly the finances have been a bit of a shit show in recent years.
I'm going to suggest you make this concise, otherwise we're still going to be here in 45 minutes.
It will be. Now, as part of that, because they're clearly going to be in breach of FFP come the end of the season as it stands, the EFL have said, right, what you've now got to do is tell us how you're going to clean up this mess. And Leicester have said, no, we don't. Your rules are ambiguous. The wording of them's not quite right. So they've taken it to an independent tribunal who have actually sided with Leicester on this and said, yeah, the wording's a bit ambiguous, actually. So they don't have to start reporting this stuff to you and telling you what they're going to do until it's the 1st of April, I think it will come into effect. So it doesn't change the fact that there's likely to be a breach as it stands. Breach hasn't happened because it'll be the end of this season where the breach happens. So they've still got the chance to sell players. But it's about reporting what they're going to do to deal with it. They're saying, you've got to tell us. Leicester are saying, no, we don't, not until 1st of April. And that's where we are. So they could still be in breach as it stands, and points deductions could follow, but probably going to be next season.
It's basically correct from my understanding. This all comes back to FFP, PSR. Anytime we speak about this, it is basically the application of financial fair play rules and mechanisms by different governing bodies or different divisions. It's essentially the same thing. What you have to remember is that the rules do differ between governing bodies and leagues, and so do the sizes of losses that you're permitted every year. So if you're a Premier League club, you're allowed to lose more than if you're a Championship club, for obvious reasons, because Premier League clubs have a much bigger income. You judged on 3-year accounting periods. This 3-year accounting period for Leicester covers 2 seasons in the Premier League plus this season in the Championship. You can lose £35 million a year in the Premier League. You can lose a top-end figure of £13 million a year in the Championship. Therefore, their losses, and we won't get into the things that are exempt from FFP, but under FFP rules, what counts towards it, their losses have to be £83 million or below.
So it's 35 for the Premier League, 35 for the Premier League, 13 for the first season in the EFL.
Championship, which is this season. It doesn't seem to be in dispute that they're going to breach that, and it did basically say in the document that looks like it's going to happen. But the argument was almost so there's a serious side to this, or a potentially damaging side for Leicester, which is that if they're in breach, they will face some form of sanctions, although you have to factor into this the very strong possibility that they're then going to get promoted, and whether or not that might influence what's able to happen, because you'll remember that when Leicester got promoted in 2014, there was then a ludicrously long process of because at the time they'd breached FFP rules, process to decide how they were going to be punished, and it took 4 years to be settled, and in the end they paid a fine of about £3 million, at which point they were in the Premier League. So what a breach would actually amount to in terms of punishment is really difficult to say, so let's just park that for a little bit. But obviously that's a problem for them if they do breach, and they could face sanctions. This and what the EFL were tweeting about yesterday in the statement does rather refer to a technicality, which is the question of whether or not before Christmas, given that the EFL's calculations reckoned that Leicester were going to be in breach, Leicester had to submit a proper, strict, formal budget plan to explain to them how they were going to deal with that and how they were not going to be in breach. As you said, Leicester felt that the rules didn't apply to them because they'd come down from the Premier League. The panel who judged the review of this sided with them and agreed that they didn't. The EFL are now talking about amending the rules to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And this seems to go on time and time again, which is that every time there's a sort of stress test of the rules, and I always think 2007 Leeds in administration, the fact that these rules exist in paper form, in black and white, but there's a difference between writing them down and actually trying to apply them through a process which can be challenged legally. The review panel basically said even if the spirit of the rules should mean what the EFL are saying, the actual wording of them doesn't, so no, Leicester don't need to submit this business plan. That doesn't mean Leicester aren't going to be in breach, which they probably are further down the line. But for now, that can has kind of been kicked down the road, and it may well be that by the time, I think it almost certainly will be, that by the time any breach comes to be dealt with, Leicester will find themselves back in the Premier League.
I guess it remains to be seen then, Phil, whether they breach the Premier League threshold as well as the EFL one, and whether that then means that they can apply. So it's all very complicated because you're dealing with two different bodies, isn't it, in the Premier League and the EFL, and the two, while there is now overlap in the FFP rules between the two, it's not quite watertight as we've seen because, again, they say they've stress tested it in this, haven't they?
They have, and what's happening is that suddenly, and this, I think this is in no small way connected to the threat of an independent regulator. The application of FFP rules and, more to the point, sanctions has started to become quite strict, and clubs are now genuinely worried that they're going to fall foul of them. The little piece that we were working on earlier this week about Mbappe going from PSG, and we're saying in this piece, you could probably count on one hand the number of clubs who could actually afford Mbappe. But given how worried English clubs now seem to be about the application of FFP sanctions, you can probably count on one finger the number of clubs who are realistically going to sign him, and that's Real Madrid. And partly because that's where he really wants to go. But factoring in Mbappe's wages would be massively difficult at a time where accounts and FFP losses are being focused on and scrutinised more strictly than they ever have been before.
But Phil, Real Madrid are skint, and unless they could have that European Super League, they were under threat, weren't they?
Yeah, you'd be amazed, really.
Are they all right again now?
Always sort of tend to find a way, in the way that Barcelona got Rafinha done. There are levers that you can pull to coin a phrase. So you've got that going on. I couldn't help reading the Leicester judgment yesterday and thinking to myself, is nobody who runs the game standing back and looking at all this and thinking, look what this has come to. The game just seems to be rife with this stuff at the moment and completely dominated by this stuff. I mean, is anybody doing better out of football at the moment than your KCs and your legal people, lawyers and solicitors who are involved in these kind of constant cases that get dealt with and then get appealed and go on for months and months? And it just seems to be harvest time for them. But it is turning football into this weird sort of bureaucratic organisation and process where, what's going on off the field and in your account seems to matter far more than what's going on happening on the field at the moment.
And as a fan, all of you, it's wrapped up in self-interest as well, because obviously Leeds fans have gone, oh, hang on, is this a points deduction? And then looking ahead to next year, people are going, well, if they're going to breach next year, you've got people like Forest and Everton fans going, well, if we can stay up this year, then that Leicester are going to come up and then they'll get a points penalty next year, which will be good for us because then it means that hopefully knocks a relegation place out there and they're going to have to sell players. So that's good for us next year. And the whole thing is...
But then again, let's factor in who's going to then be in breach in 12 months' time. And at the moment, it feels inevitable that somebody will be because everybody seems to be breaching it all over the place. I can't decide whether, if there was no threat of an independent regulator from the government, whether FFP, PSR and everything else would be starting to fall apart because it doesn't seem fit for... I get the point of it and I get the purpose of it and I know why it's there. But in so many respects and in so many of these different cases, it doesn't feel like it's fit for purpose. It doesn't feel as if anybody really knows how the rules are going to stand up until they get properly tested. And what the review panel basically said in the case of Leicester was, putting aside whether or not they're going to be in breach further down the line, which they probably are, on the point that the EFL are trying to impose, i.e. Leicester need to submit a business plan to show how they're not going to breach PSR rules. The rules don't stand up. The EFL do not have the right to demand that from them. Leicester are right. And it's It's mildly embarrassing in the way that I think if these 115 charges against City that the Premier League have brought, the Premier League basically saying we think they are in breach of these separate issues. If that doesn't really stand up, and if there's no great consequence from that, then that's fairly embarrassing as well, isn't it?
And they'll be lawyered up to the gills as well.
Of course they will.
Well,
they already are. Everybody knows that they aren't making any secret of that.
I mean, to go back to the root of this, then, what are the rules actually for? What is the point of this being in place in the first place? Because there's no suggesting that Leicester are failing to pay people or meet creditors.
Is it levelling the playing field?
There are a couple of things going on here. One is that the authorities nominally don't want clubs to overspend to the point where they put their existence in jeopardy, or where they're not able to function or to finance day-to-day operations, where they become insolvent in the way that Leeds did back in 2007.
But it doesn't do that at all, does it?
No, of course it doesn't. And the reason that it doesn't do that is because the whole basis of FFP is about how much money you're trying to lose. I mean, in day-to-day life, if I was saying to Dan, every year you're permitted to lose £1 million, then
I'd do it.
You might not.
I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. You might not breach my rules, but at some point somebody's going to come and knock on the door and say, yeah, but you need to pay for your car or your house, and if you don't, we're going to take it off you. So I think that the theory with it is that your owners and directors, your shareholders have money that means that they can pick up losses, which they definitely can. And plus you can sell players and everything else. You can, in the way that Forest did with Brennan Johnson, if you've got a problem, I'll solve it by selling him to Tottenham for you.
Check out the hook.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Well, Phil resolves it.
Yeah, that was a bit retro. But, if you...
I think the kids know Vanilla Ice.
Yeah, I think they probably do. I don't think kids listen to this, do they? It's, I reckon your demographic is us. They think.
This FFP chat's pulling him in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The mention of Mbappe's probably got some people excited.
Yeah, they're all chatting about this in the pub last night.
The algorithm will love that, yeah.
But, so, yeah, they don't want clubs to lose too much money. But also, there is this idea, and this has kind of been pushed by some of your more established clubs who have been, powerful for a long time, that they don't want... They kind of don't want anybody to just become competitive overnight on the basis that suddenly somebody from the Middle East has bought them with oil money or state money and can therefore buy anybody they like, including Mbappe, and suddenly go from being mid-table Premier League club to winning absolutely everything overnight.
And the teams arguing against this now include Man City and Chelsea, who became wealthy overnight.
Yeah, and also people's positions on this stuff, and not just on FFP, but on the controls over loan signings and signings from related clubs, so clubs who are within your own football group and everything else. It seems to ebb and flow. I would suspect sometimes because of self-interest.
Well, just to return it to what Michael was saying there, I wrote down in the throes of talking about that, Everton, Forest and Leicester, which are the clubs that you mentioned. Those are the three clubs that finished above us in the relegation race last year. So if we've been compliant and all three have breached, it's like, what do we do about this? And can you blame the club for pursuing legal action, which they're reportedly doing? And the other thing...
It totally invites that.
And the second thing that follows from that is onto this season, which is that Leicester are at the top of the league and will probably win it. I mean, almost certainly go up unless something fun happens, while in breach of the EFL regulations. But by the time it's resolved, they've already rolled the dice and gone up. So they might end up getting punished in the Premier League, but there's no consequence to this season, is there?
Well, that's exactly what happened last time. They got promoted in 2014, and then 4 years later they got a £3 million fine.
So what if we've played by the rules and they get out of this division by cheating? It's going to result in more legal action, isn't it? Surely.
And my understanding is, and we never have oversight of the accounts or the precise calculations, but my understanding has always been that Leeds have been compliant with PSR. I don't think by a massive margin. And from what I was told, the kind of the expediting the Sinistera sale to Bournemouth was in no small way to get money in to make sure that they stayed on the right side of that line. But we've always been told all along that they have been. I think I've said before, and it's not much of a secret, that if Leeds don't go up this season and get to the summer, then they're going to have to cut the cloth and they're going to have to balance the books. And I think you will see player sales for that precise reason. And, you have to say about Leicester, last summer they did sell Maddison, they did sell Harvey Barnes. It's not as if they didn't pull any money in, but all the signals seem to be saying that they are still going to be in breach of this £83 million limit that they should be meeting. But what that means in the grand scheme, what that actually amounts to in terms of a punishment, how much it really hinders them as a club, we're going to see in time. And half the time, I think the problem is that you don't feel like the people running this stuff can even answer that question.
Let's hoover up that young demographic as well then. Messi or Ronaldo? Who's a finished club?
Well, it's neither Messi or Ronaldo anymore, is it?
No.
No, you see. Oh boy. Yeah.
What else do kids talk about?
Erling Haaland.
That clip on TikTok was good, wasn't it?
FIFA. Yeah. I was gonna dig out YouTube there, but you guys are big on YouTube. So you're down with it.
You're big on YouTube, Phil.
No,
don't you dare.
I'm just
avoid this.
on your coattails. Yeah, that's pretty much all it is.
No, the more important, the more pertinent and sexier issue is Leeds United heading to Sheffield Wednesday on Friday night in the Championship in a bid to get promoted. I mean, as far as like financial basket cases are concerned, Sheffield Wednesday have had their fair share of fun, haven't they, in recent years? Just to tie all that thought together. But yeah,
they are playing well though, Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you feel about that game now in the wake of there was quite a high level of stress at Ellen Road on Tuesday, which I think it sort of dissipated a little bit over the last 48 hours. For me personally, anyway. I don't know about you, Michael.
Yeah, no, it has. I felt calmer having watched the extended highlights back and seeing how many good chances we actually had and how relatively few chances they had. They just had the ball, didn't they, for large periods of that second half, which was stressing me out for, I wouldn't say for no reason, but it's not like they were carving us open every 5 minutes.
One of the big things with this Leeds team is that they don't give away big chances easily or cheaply. So in that period of the game against Norwich, where it seemed as if Leeds couldn't get a foot on the ball for about 10, 15 minutes, Norwich didn't actually create anything. So even though there was the tension of watching Leeds looking like they were kind of stuck in mud, there weren't really any consequences for it. And I'm the same with Michael. I wasn't at the game on Tuesday. Nancy was covering it for us. But I watched it and I could feel in the first half there were enough chances to get over the line. I thought the Dan James penalty shout was a really strong one. It wasn't that easy to tell from the replays what definitely happened, but I think that could easily have been given. And they went from, in the first half, Kamara looking much better than he had against Huddersfield, much more on it, to the midfield kind of losing control in the second half and Stoke having a lot of the ball, but not necessarily having so many chances that you felt as if Leeds were kind of on thin ice for much of that game. It felt to me like the sort of match that you're trying... It's like a pre-run-in match that. The Championship's dead gluttonous, isn't it, in terms of the fixture list? Like, Farke came into the press conference on Wednesday's pre-Sheffield Wednesday press conference and he said, "Nice to see you again." And he wasn't wrong. It does feel like we're seeing him 4 times a week. So I decided to count it up. He's done 60 press conferences since the turn of the year. 60 press conferences. He's done 30 press conferences since the turn of the year. We've had 66 days. You know, like there's so much football being played. And I think that on Tuesday was a classic, get this done, squeeze what you need out of it, leave it behind and move on game. We're not quite at the run-in where everything feels on edge and it feels like, you know, individual results are going to absolutely tip the balance on the day, but we're not far off either. And there was just a bit of, I think it was a bit of all-round fatigue in that game on Tuesday.
Is that the biggest threat to Friday then, do you think, a bit of fatigue?
I did ask him on Wednesday how the players are mentally, like whether they're fresh or whatever else, and it seems inconceivable to me that they'll be 100% fresh just because the sheer amount of football that they're having to play. I think when Huddersfield seemed to me to be a bit of a warning about what might go on at Hillsborough, in that I think Leeds can expect a really difficult game there, but I don't think it will shape up in the same way. From what I've seen of Wednesday, they are trying to play, and it is kind of working for them. They are in really good form and have gone from a position where you suspected that they were probably down to actually having as good a chance as any of the other clubs who are in that massive glut at the bottom of the table, staying up. And for a club who've made a lot of poor decisions and got a lot of things wrong over the years, this managerial appointment seems to have been a pretty good one for them, given the circumstances that they were in. But it's a really hard fixture, I think, this, which you know, will focus the mind, sharpen the mind, but also it's like 2 days in between to turn around. Farke complained about this when he was having a pop at, you know, the broadcast schedule and everything else. This, I think, was the period that he was most annoyed about, this little bounce from Stoke on Tuesday to Sheffield Wednesday on a Friday night.
At least it hasn't involved too much travelling.
No, it definitely hasn't.
And it's worth saying it is the same for Sheffield Wednesday because they also played on Tuesday. Yeah, it's not like they've had a week off.
Absolutely. I think Farke's view would be that the disruption for Leeds from TV games is absolutely vast at the moment. You know, it's every week, isn't it? Getting shuffled around all over the place. So he wasn't chuffed about this, but they do then have a decent gap before Millwall, and after that they've got the international break, which not just for Leeds, for all 4 of the clubs up there is going to be absolutely critical when it comes to just drawing breath for the last time.
And Southampton now have an extra game to squeeze in somewhere as well.
Yeah.
Is that where you were this week, Phil?
What?
With your
Burning down a
with your
lock-up,
matches and your petrol?
burning down a lock-up outside St Mary's.
Yeah.
Get this game postponed. Leicester through to the next round of the FA Cup as well, which has already meant a postponement there. And Southampton, weren't able to play that game against Preston, so that will fall.
That postponement is Leicester versus Southampton, isn't it? I think?
Yes, yeah,
and that's the same weekend as we play Millwall. So next time out.
And then obviously Southampton now have this postponement against Preston to sort out as well. But it's, I don't know. Do you remember a month or so ago we were talking about how psychologically with Southampton they'd had this really long run and were still third. You know, it's a little bit similar for Leeds at the moment. I think 10 wins from 11 games, a draw on top of that as well, and still behind Ipswich, who just keep on doing it.
Can you call Southampton a finished club so we can again just be very reactionary and modern?
Well, if I do that, then they'll get back into the running.
That's true.
Matter of weeks, won't they?
We can't jinx it.
I remember somebody on Twitter back when the pound was having a disaster against the dollar, calling sterling a finished currency, which I thought was very good. Very good. You know?
Yes, there's no coming back for sterling from here.
Can apply to every single aspect in every walk of life.
I was going to say, we think it's a little bit tense up here at the top, don't we? But looking at the bottom and how compact that's got, if Sheffield Wednesday beat us on Friday, they go up to 16th temporarily. But if they lose, then they will finish the weekend in 23rd. It's quite some shift, isn't it?
Yeah, I yesterday I was at Manacroft Academy in Dewsbury just doing a bit of a careers talk for some of the pupils there, and I was speaking to one of the teachers who was a Huddersfield fan who was saying to me, Leeds will finish in the playoffs and lose, Huddersfield will be fine. And I'm looking at Huddersfield thinking, don't know, on the basis of that performance last weekend and where they are in the league, I'm not convinced, but I don't know how on earth you would call that at the bottom at the moment.
Well, their season peaked with a draw against the mighty Leeds United, I think.
There you go.
There you go. There's the controversy there.
Yeah.
But yeah, up at the top end, I mean, again, psychologically going into the weekend, I know we don't really want to play Friday. We prefer to play Saturday. But again, it's the chance to put your nose in front, isn't it? And to force Ipswich into not being able to drop points. Again, Southampton will be looking on thinking, bloody hell, this one's now getting out of sight. So it's the psychology that ebbs and flows around all this is it's too much, quite frankly.
But the thing is, you were saying to Michael, talking about the tension on Tuesday night, I've seen seasons before, seasons where Leeds have been in the running for promotion, where it's felt as if everybody's climbing the walls from a really early stage, and it just doesn't feel like that this time. And I'm not saying there won't come a point very soon where everybody is on edge because it starts to feel like this is crunch time. But there is a bit of a what will be attitude, I think, which is not a bad thing. And I wonder if that is just related to the fact that you can't really be much better than this.
Well, I saw somebody work out on Wacko that if this, or was it Twitter, it might have been, whatever, X, that if this was, our points total was applied to last season, we'd have been 13 points clear of third now.
I think I saw as well that at pretty much any point in the last decade or something, 76 points would have you in first place.
Yeah.
Right.
And here we are. But I think as well, it's the fact that we keep winning games, so you can't really complain too much.
No.
And also, we've kind of seen what happens when you go up. And it doesn't make for the happiness we maybe thought it would. The first season up was quite good, but not that we got to go into grounds and see it.
And even then, it wasn't that good until about April when we realised we were going to stay up. I think with a bit more Premier League experience under your belt, and you know that, let's say, 35, 38 points is going to be more than enough. Even still, I didn't have much fun in that season. Because
the real hand-wringing begins when we don't go up and we have to sell Archie Gray.
Yeah.
And everyone's all of a sudden...
Then, what a happy thought.
Then all of a sudden everyone's very upset we didn't go up because they're like, but why can't we keep him?
It's I don't know, it's the paradox, isn't it, of you can't afford to stay down here. And I guess it brings us back to what we were saying about FFP and stuff, like everybody's right up against the limits and has to sell in order to survive and comply. And the only way to avoid that is to go up. But you go up and then you watch Burnley and you watch Sheffield United, you think, well, is this the glittering prize that awaits at the end of it? A potential, a pumping, not most weeks. It depends how you approach it, I guess, doesn't it? But
in some respects, you feel like football's got itself in a right mess, except, I was going on about the number of games in the Championship. Like the numbers don't lie, and Championship's one of the most watched leagues in in Europe in terms of people coming into the stadiums. So on the engagement front, in that sense, they're absolutely getting it right. And your TV deals tell you that in the EFL as well, because they've just announced a new international one, which is worth a good amount of money. But in the Premier League too, the way it keeps going up, people just want these games more and more and more. So it's not as if the product is getting any less appealing. But I suppose if you focus in closely on the Premier League and the Championship in isolation, and also the relationship between those two divisions, you do definitely see a problem. I think if Leeds get promoted this season, go back into the Premier League, I'd like to think that with this ownership group, as opposed to the previous one, that you would get, even if you're not suddenly in contention for Europe or for trophies or for whatever else, you will have a more kind of structured and definite plan for development and growth, a little bit in the way that Brighton and others have done. And I do think there's something that you can invest in with that, and there's something you can get on board with in that respect. I just feel I totally get what you're saying about, it wasn't that rewarding going up into the Premier League last time. But I think if in 2 years' time you were still going round the houses with these fixtures in the Championship, you'd be desperate for a change.
You were saying this when we were talking about the season ticket renewals on this week's weekly update. Came out on Thursday, this one, where actually, it's nice seeing 36,000 inside Ellen Road every week at the minute, and people are prepared, because we're good, to jump on the opportunity to be in the ground.
Uh-huh.
If you are, let's say, 12 months down the line, you've sold a lot of players and things are not going quite so good, suddenly it looks very, very expensive. And Ellen Road, and I said this on that show, Ellen Road will vote with its feet. It always has done. People will quickly lose interest in it. If you regress to being just another Championship club, which is what all this spending is all about at the top end, isn't it? It's desperately fighting to not be the team that, Blackburn, for example. I think it was on the Athletic this week. Was it Ollie Kane
and Nancy did a piece on it? Yeah,
wrote a bit on Blackburn saying that they've finally achieved financial stability under the Venkies, but it's completely boring.
Yeah,
and they're in risk of going down. Yeah,
nowhere in particular. So I suppose if you apply that to what we were talking about at the very start of this episode, Leicester, and being in breach and trying to make sure that they're getting out of the division at the first time of asking, why wouldn't they be doing that? Your parachute payments are another thing that sort of crystallise your attitude towards saying we need to get out of this division ASAP and not mess about in it. Leeds are no different. And that's it. It's not as if Leeds are saying it'll be absolutely fine if we went up in 2 years. It might be absolutely fine, but if you can go up this season, 100 times.
I'm sure I'll upset fans of either Leicester or Blackburn, but I consider them to be roughly the same size of club. So I think Leicester should grow up, take the medicine, and just accept they're about mid-table in the Championship.
Gravitate to 16th.
No, that seems fair.
Take a points deduction this year, 15, 20 points, whatever it takes, and then just settle right into it.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah.
But just to return to something Michael said before, that was less of a baited hook, which was about going down and going up and then going down again. I think going up and then going down again doesn't hold the same fear anymore as being 15th forever like we used to be. Where you've got no hope, because you always live on hope. That as a football fan, ultimately, I think that's the currency that kind of drives everything along. It's the idea that things one day will be better, or one day you might do something. So to remove all that, that's when you end up like we were in the Championship, just in that endless cycle of nothingness. Whereas if we go up, it's shit and horrible up there, but it's the only place you can be, and hopefully maybe you start to claw your way up. But even if you do go down, it's like, well, whatever, we'll have to sell a few players to balance the books.
Or just loan them out and get no money.
Yeah, well, whichever it might be.
It's a good way of doing it too.
Yeah, whichever it might be. But there's no fear in any of it, really. The fear is that you've got no hope.
Well, the next season always starts, doesn't it? I used to find that with the Leeds constantly. You finish 15th, everybody's deflated, everything else. And then it comes around to August and you get going again. But at the same time, I think we found during the Bielsa era, and we're seeing it this season as well, these periods do matter to people. And it does matter that every now and again you do strive for something, and you kind of have aspiration as opposed to just making up the numbers, and Leeds should be good enough to do that. They should have been good enough to do it this season with the squad that Farke was left with at the end of August. I still think to a certain extent, it's been a little bit underestimated how good this season has been and how well he's put it all together. I mean, he's looks like he's going to get the next Manager of the Month award as well, which is 3 for the season. I don't think anybody at Leeds has ever done that.
Looks increasingly delighted about them as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Next one, it'll be smashed to bits.
Yeah, I think Bielsa did it, but was the Premier League involved in that?
I think Bielsa did 2 in the Championship.
Right.
I think it's a season where he did 2.
Somebody will be along to correct me.
I mean,
if we're
there
wrong.
was actually an amazingly long period where Leeds didn't win it at all.
Was that when we were stopped for COVID?
No, it was like post. I'm sure Grayson won it in like 2010, and then I mean there were reasons for this other than what you're going to say, which is EFL bias.
Hockaday? No,
employing lots of bad managers.
That's probably a.
I mean,
Darko
Milanic barely got a month, so he can't have Manager of the Month.
Well, didn't get a month. No, but yeah, it kind of tells you that it's been very, very, very good this season. It has been.
Sheffield Wednesday, 4 wins on the bounce.
Yes.
And us in a good run of form after a little minor wobble by dropping points at Huddersfield. I think just destabilised things. Looking at that as a fixture versus the other ones, Cardiff versus Ipswich. Interesting there. And people saying Ipswich are going to trip up at some point and they keep untripping up. Well, mind you, we were saying this week, weren't we? They'd won 1 game in 9, which is what's allowed us to claw them back in. So you just have to hope they hit the buffers again at some point. Or we just continue to outperform them as we have done.
Well, that was the important thing about Tuesday, I think.
No
matter what the game was like, was that a draw at Huddersfield didn't then become a draw or a defeat to Stoke, and suddenly, you've got a week that's held you back quite badly.
Yeah, Cardiff Ipswich. Hull versus Leicester is one that intrigues me. Mm-hmm. Given that Leicester have just started to have this little wobble, and Hull are in pretty good form, aren't they? They've been
a useful side. Hull, they've got. I think
unbeaten. They're unbeaten in 5, 2 wins and then 3 draws though, so they've kind of levelled a little bit.
I think they'll be a bit of a threat in the playoffs. Them if they get into the playoffs. I still think whoever finishes 3rd and 4th, the odds will sway massively towards them because of what's gone on to this point. But we've seen before that the playoffs is like a complete reset, isn't it? Very often, and I think Hull will sort of quietly fancy cat among the pigeons. I think if they get in the playoffs,
yeah. But yeah, they beat Leicester, didn't they, earlier in the season? I think.
Yes, they did. Yeah,
at the Crisp Bowl.
Yes.
So I think that's the one that really intrigues me there most. I think where Leicester, if they wobble again, particularly if we win and then you're back, stop projecting.
Any news on the home and away table? Is it?
No, not looking, mate. Not looking.
Yesterday's news.
And I know we've said that Southampton are a finished club, so we shouldn't even bother to look at their
that's now a finished website.
Yeah. Southampton versus Sunderland is the other one in the top 4. But yeah, what do you reckon to those fixtures?
I think they'll all go against us.
That's the safest way to approach it.
I think we'll lose on Friday, then watch grimly as the other teams all win.
I think it's hard to call some of them. Cardiff's a difficult game for Ipswich, and like you say, that was a big result for Leicester on Tuesday night. They really, really needed to win that. But I think for Leeds, there won't be much peripheral vision outside of Hillsborough on Friday night. That is a tough game.
Just a bit, it's a nice feel-good family atmosphere there.
As it always is.
Usually, yeah.
As it always is, Phil. What's your favourite thing that's happened between Leeds and Sheffield Wednesday at Hillsborough?
At Hillsborough?
Yeah.
Moving
Is it Mateus Klick's goal?
That's the one, yeah.
I was thinking of that.
And actually, sadly, that what happened in 2012, it was a blinding goal that set some of that off from Michael Tongue, wasn't it? A right old finish. But yeah, we'll go with Klick's goal.
As opposed
for
to
PR purposes,
yeah,
as opposed to anything else.
So if I could make a wish about this one, I think it's, and this is what I was hoping for from Tuesday, and it didn't quite materialise in the same way, but a goal in the opening 15 or 20 minutes just to set the stall out for the game. What do you think?
You know that phrase in
for us?
Bad Santa?
Which one?
Wish in one hand, shit in the other. See which fills up first.
Yeah. What does that mean?
It means that a win any which way would do fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to sort of formulate an ideal way that this unfolds is to get that goal in the first 15 or 20 minutes and then just run away with it again.
Yeah.
What I don't want is to get to half an hour where they, the crowd starts to lift because they think we've got a chance here, which I think is why if we just scored that early goal at Huddersfield,
I was just going to say if they get chances like they had in the early part of the Huddersfield game, or that chance that they had, they've got to take it.
It sets up a different game, doesn't it, at Huddersfield, if that happens. And I would say the same applies to this. And I know I'm stating the bloody obvious here by score early makes a better thing than not scoring early, but that's what I'd like to happen because
I'd like to
I'm
not
sick of being
spend
stressed.
The majority of a game waiting for someone to take a goal kick or a throw in as well, which is what the Huddersfield game felt like. It was just like, Here we go. There goes another minute of this. Another minute of my life, just waiting, just watching that keeper run across the touchline inexplicably to pick up a ball.
I think any win from this would be a good win, without a doubt. But there's no doubt Leeds are good enough to win it. I think.
And I think having, and players and football clubs and managers often talk about, platforms and springboards and things like that. Having dropped the points at Huddersfield in what was a bit of a grind to then reset, if you like, by getting through to full time against Stoke with the 3 points, build on that again and start to return to form maybe. And we could do with some of the attacking players finding a little bit of form maybe again, couldn't we? Because the defence is the glue that's holding it all together at the minute. And Ruter's gone off the boil a bit, Somerville's gone off the boil a bit. A lot
of games though.
Yeah.
This is it.
That's what I was talking about with the fatigue.
And a lot of games. It seemed to me to be the right decision to bring Dan James back in on Tuesday, not just because he scored, but he seemed like the biggest threat. So it feels to me like James starts again at Hillsborough. I personally feel like he'll probably leave Connor Roberts in at right back, and I think Roberts is the sort of personality that they can hook onto quite a big way in this run. And I think him on the pitch is probably a good thing, although he clearly has Gray there as an option.
What do you think, Archie into midfield instead of maybe Kamara?
Well, no, I mean, I wondered if he might do that on Tuesday against Stoke, and I think the fact that he's gone with Kamara again makes me think that he's kind of wedded to that as opposed to mixing it up. But he does have Gray there to use, definitely.
Interesting.
But Struijk isn't back. Struijk will be back on the other side of the international break. So from what Farke was saying when we spoke to him this week, I think should be available for some part of the running and probably a good chunk of it. Jayden Anthony sounded to us like his mother's funeral was on Tuesday. Sounds like he won't be involved on Friday as well, which you can understand. And all in all, seemed like it would be the same squad.
Yeah.
Do you think Joseph across the Chelsea and then the Stoke game has now played himself into being the Bamford sub as opposed to Pirro?
Very much so. Yeah. Or at least a strong alternative to Pirro. I think you've now got a choice there.
But you can see that he uses Pirro differently, can't you? Because he brought him on to do that dropping deep role, whereas Joseph was leading the line on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think it was one of the reasons why I thought we might have seen Joseph at an earlier stage of the Huddersfield game, because there is, he does, I think, fit more into the style of 9 that Bamford is than what Pirro gives Leeds. But yeah, he's had a good month as Joseph, and he's looked up to it as well. He hasn't looked out of his depth, and he looks physically strong enough. He's clearly got talent and technical ability. So I think he'll have a role to play before the season ends.
Just when it comes to the opposition as well, obviously Poveda can't play, and he seems to have been. Has he been something of a bit of a catalyst for their revival?
He has been very good for them. Everybody says, yeah, by all accounts.
And Barry Bannon was one of the few players who could actually attempt to pass a football at Ellen Road when we saw the home fixture.
That was a cracking game, wasn't it?
And he came off at half time, didn't he, in their recent game? I know the noise is coming out of Sheffield Wednesday that he'll probably be all right, and Danny Rolls not giving much away. I don't think didn't signal any particular concern for his absence, but you wonder how much of that is kidology,
Yeah.
So
who'd have thought?
But if you take those two out of it, then hopefully that weakens them to enough of an extent that we should have too much for them.
I think Poveda missing definitely weakens them. But having said that, they've clearly found a bit of a rhythm. They've clearly settled into a tactical approach that suits them quite nicely. So this will, I think, be tight.
Do you know what it is that they're doing? Do we have enough data about that?
I must confess, I haven't had a close look at Wednesday in terms of tactics, aside from to say that they are very much wedded to using the ball and playing with the ball. It's not when they came to Ellen Road back in September, they seemed very, very happy without it. I say very happy without it. They were certainly without it for long periods, which
it was quite industrial, wasn't it?
In fairness to them, it's not unlike a lot of what we've seen. It's not as if many clubs are coming to Ellen Road and really having a bash. And I know Stoke got on the ball in the second half on Tuesday, but their approach before half time was absolutely typical of how it's been. So they do like to play Wednesday, and they do like to pass, and it doesn't feel, from what I have seen of them, it doesn't feel as if they are playing the percentages in the way that a lot of teams in danger of going down tend to do. I definitely felt like Huddersfield were playing the percentages against Leeds, but I think they will try and go a bit more punch for punch Wednesday. Which,
I don't know, that gives me a mild feeling of encouragement.
Yes, I can totally see why. A bit more space to play in. But at the same time, I suppose there have been quite a lot of games this season where you haven't felt that Leeds have been at much risk because the opposition aren't really trying to put them at much risk, whereas this might be slightly different. I think, whereas there have been games recently that have been televised that have not been much of a spectacle, I think this will be worth the money Friday.
We shall see, eh? Back then, after the weekend, to see how that one went, and another weekend of stress.
Might all be over by Friday.
I mean, if we win on Friday, you can enjoy your weekend then, can't you? And you feel less.
I just wish I could stop myself looking at other results as they're coming in, because I'm looking at where Ipswich are behind. Oh, Ipswich, they missed a penalty. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, well, fucking hell.
Yeah. That's the, again. That's the life of a football fan, isn't it?
Deliberately go right. I know it's on TV, that game, whatever it might be. I'm not going to watch it, and I successfully don't watch it. But then I just check my phone every 5 minutes instead.
That's great, though, isn't it?
Well, the other thing is as well, because you've got so many televised games, it's the same in the Premier League. The games are spread over such a wide period that it's not as if you're sat at Elland Road with, Southampton, Leicester and Ipswich all playing at the same time and it all kind of happening in the space of 90 minutes or, a couple of hours. It tends to stretch out. So you're right. I mean, it was like that with Ipswich on Tuesday night. And you just felt it at 2-2. You just thought something like they're going to sneak this. And they did.
I'll tell you, I mean, I know we're all kind of looking forward to, and I presume the players are as well, looking forward to a bit of a break because you've got 9 days between Sheffield Wednesday and Millwall, but that is going to feel like a fucking age if we lose on Friday.
Yes, and then you have the international break as well, which is going to feel like an even longer time if the table isn't looking as you want it to look.
But it will, won't it?
I love your optimism.
But why not? Like I say,
absolutely.
As I said before, hope is the currency on which we kind of trade in football, isn't it? And I always maintain hope, and we've got enough reason to.
Is it a finished currency?
No.
Unlike sterling.
Still,
no.
It's an alive and kicking currency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, very much so. So yeah, cling on to your hope, enjoy it, enjoy the ride. I think, and if we do manage to get up this season, we will look back on it as a pleasurable experience in much the same way that we did with the Bielsa one. Like it's now. I guess it's how you look back on like past relationships at times. You can get like misty-eyed about them, can't you? You forget all the crap reasons why you broke up. You think, oh, that was a nice thing.
It's just deep.
Yeah. It's true, isn't it? It's true. Over time, the memory kind of softens a little bit, and you just remember the end result and how you felt on the day when you celebrated, rather than all the strife that went into it on the way.
So going up in the second season was a good thing, ultimately, under Bielsa. That's what you're saying?
Speak to
Same
you
again
on Monday. See you soon. Bye.
The Square Ball Podcast.